Hello, everybody, and welcome into a new edition of the Patriots Beat podcast here on the CLNS Media Podcast Network and on Patriots Press Pass on YouTube. I'm Evan Lazar. Can't even say my own name this morning or this afternoon, whatever time of day it is. Joined as always by Alex Barth. And Alex, first of all, thank you. Thank you for your time today, Alex. I didn't know if you had enough time for us this week with all your 98.5 happenings over there. You can listen to Alex on the radio all week long, right? All week long. Am I saying that?
Yep. Tomorrow morning, 6 to 10 a.m. Yeah, tomorrow morning. You need to plug your mic in, by the way. Tomorrow morning, 6 to 10 a.m. with Tim McCone and Ty Anderson. Thursday night with Ty Anderson, 6 to 11 p.m. And then Saturday after whatever the early there's no bowl game on Saturday. It's 4:30 leading into the Bruins with Brendan Glasheen. And then it was on with actually Greg Bedard today. We had a little CLNS party over on 98.5 The Sports Hub this morning. You can hear that show back on 98.5thesportshub.com.
Well, there you go. Is my mic clearer now?
Not even close.
What? I don't know what's going on with it. But
today has been like, for those watching, it's just been, this is the kind of day it's been.
Okay. All right.
There you go. There we go.
All right. Just had to play with it a little bit. Okay. Anyway, so obviously not the day that, not the show, not the day that we wanted to have here today or yesterday for the Patriots falling to Buffalo, as you can see right down there, 33-21. I'm sure all of you watched the game yesterday and were as frustrated and as disappointed in the Patriots' performance. And as we titled the show today, are the Patriots cooked? I think is the one theme that everybody is going to come out with over the next couple of days. It was a bad loss. I think on top of everything in terms of the execution, the X's and O's, which we're going to get to here in a little bit, the lack of energy, the lack of urgency, the slow start that they had, and just the fact that Buffalo yesterday seemed like they wanted it a little bit more than the Patriots, especially to start that game, Alex. All those things are frustrating, I would say, when you have a game with such high stakes, with a chance to win the division, or at least essentially win the division on your home turf. You've put yourself in this great position, and the Bills go out there, and as Bill Belichick said after the game, the Patriots didn't do anything well enough to truly be competitive at any point in time in this game. And although they did get it to one score late at 26-21, it truly felt like the Pats were outplayed from start to finish in this game.
Yeah, I talked a ton last week. The one thing I didn't think would happen, and the Bills are a talented team. I certainly thought there was a chance that they came in and we got a shootout or something, or, a competitive football game, and it was competitive on the scoreboard. But the one thing I didn't think would happen would be the Patriots coming out flat again.
Yeah.
I just, in that spot, after what happened last week, with what was on the line, after what happened 3 weeks ago, and the way the Bills reacted to that game and things Sean McDermott said after that game, to not be prepared in the way they weren't prepared. And I mean, top down, including the coaching, they sleepwalked. The fact it was as close as it was, frankly, I think says a lot.
Yeah.
Because it never felt that way. They were, J.C. Jackson dropped that ball. They could have had the lead.
Yeah.
And it still never felt like they were truly in that game. It didn't. They didn't. Everything they had done during that 7-game winning streak. And look, in the Colts game, at least there was that second half, right? At least there was that second half where there was a flash. Everything they had done during that 7-game winning streak, from coaching adjustments to being more physical than the opponent, capitalizing on mistakes, right?
Yeah.
It all went out the window. There was none of it. We didn't see a drop of that team that won 7 straight games. And I said last week, hey, look, I'm not ready to call it a pattern yet. I'm ready to call it an anomaly. What happened against Indy? Now it's a pattern.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And the stat that really stood out to me in terms of not being able to take advantage of any of the mistakes that Buffalo made in this game, Josh Allen was graded out with 10 inaccurate passes in this game, right? He had some passes that got away from him. Not all of it was perfect. I think when you watch the game, it seemed like he had an answer for everything. It seemed like every decision he made was perfect. not everything they did was 100% perfect, but the Patriots could not take advantage of some of the mistakes they made, not just the drop interceptions, but also other plays. Like, for instance, the receiver, I can't remember his name because he's somebody that we we don't talk about a lot for Buffalo.
Jake Kumaro?
Kumaro, yeah, he dropped the ball in the end zone. Buffalo still went in and scored on that drive, right? It didn't matter. The Patriots didn't capitalize. And the one thing I think that Devin McCourty said after the game that has continued to stick with me throughout all my reviews of this game so far is that when this Patriots team needs to make a play, the play in the moment, fourth quarter, down a score, get the ball back to the offense, or have the offense take the lead late in the game, or make that monumental game-shifting, game-altering type of play, they don't make those plays right now. They are not finding that play. And I think Devin McCourty was talking more about the defense and the fact that they couldn't get off the field with 7 minutes to go and a one-score game. The Mac Jones and the offense finally wakes up a little bit, and the defense couldn't make the play to stem the tide and turn it the other direction. And I think when you look at some of the great teams the Patriots have had over the last 2 decades, it wasn't always playing from ahead. It wasn't always first quarter leads. It wasn't always starting fast. I think those things are media-driven narratives and sometimes even player-driven or coaching-driven narratives that get talked about a lot but aren't actually indicative of what happens every single game or the majority of games, even for a lot of teams. You are going to get behind in the NFL. You are going to give up plays early. You're going to be the slower team to start. You are going to get yourself behind the 8 ball. The great teams are able to dig themselves out and complete these comebacks. The Patriots have come really close multiple times this season, not just in the last 2 weeks, but even before that, right? Against Tampa, against Dallas, against Miami during the 2-4 start. Now, these last 2 weeks, they have come really, really close to being able to pull off these comebacks, but they just can't put it together in all 3 phases late in the game. And I think what that comes back to is championship medal, and something that is with championship medal, it's developmental, right? You can develop that as a team, as a player, as a quarterback in the case of Mac Jones, but it's not something that just automatically comes to you. It's something that you learn and grow from. So hopefully these games and these close calls, the Patriots will be able to build on these in the future and say, we've been in this spot before. But championship medal is something that usually comes over time and isn't something that just automatically comes to players and comes to teams. This team right now doesn't have those chops. They don't have that ability to come back from 20-0 or to come back from down 13 against Buffalo in this game. They need to get that, because if they don't get that, then you have to be a front runner, and not everything is going to be front running.
Yeah, and it goes back to something I said since August, and I know people don't want to hear this today. This is the reality of it. This year is one long preseason. That's really what this is. Year one of a 4-year rebuild. Year one of a 4-year window, after a rebuild. Yeah. And there's really 2 directions they can go, right? I think losing big games is important for a young team. You look at the Chiefs losing to the Patriots in 18, right? I think that helped Patrick Mahomes and that team immensely. I really do. That's just one example. There's all kinds of examples all over sports. It's not just football.
Yeah.
The question is, when you lose that game, do you learn from it or does it become a habit? Right. I hate to make this comparison, but you look at the Boston Celtics. We've been saying for years that the Celtics are a young team that just needs to learn, and this will be the one that gets them over the hump, and they haven't done it. And those are the 2 directions you can go. And what's so frustrating about this is we don't know the answer to if this is a pattern or if this was a learning experience, probably for a year. Maybe if that Miami game turns into winning in, we get a kind of, look at it, but you're not going to be in the spot that often. And you hope, I like this core, and I think the foundation, this is the question we did off the top on Touch and Rich today. And I think it's a very good question. Can a season be both a success and a disappointment at the same time?
Yeah.
And I think that's where this Patriots season is trending, where they did have the 1 seed in the AFC late in the year. they did have a chance to win the division pretty easily, and they let it go. And that's disappointing. But the reality is this year is a foundation for the next 4 years. And we've heard guys from like the early dynasty Patriots, right? We've heard them talk about how important that 2000 season was, when even though they went 5-11, they learned how to win in the NFL, and that laid that foundation. So that's what they did with a 5-11 foundation. This is going to be a 10 or 11 win foundation here. Flip that.
Right.
So if they go on and they win a title at some point with this core, I think we look back at this season and specifically this game, and it becomes, hey, it was a painful loss, but it was important. It was crucial. What you hope is that they learn from this loss, and it's not a sign of things to come. And there's no, people can say, oh no, this is who they are. I think it's too early to say that. People can say, oh, it was a learning experience. And as much as I want to believe that that's what it was and that's what it will be, I think that, it's still too early to tell that as well. But that's the crossroads they're at from this game. You can't come out like that in a big game and expect to have success with the overall window, which is to win a title in the next 4 years. You can't do it.
Yeah.
But this is another big game where they've come out flat. You hope they learn the lesson.
Yeah, I think that question is a really interesting question, because I've been asked that a couple of times too. We talked about it on the post-game show last night. But the problem is that I think there's a time and place for that conversation. I think when we do our season recap show sometime, hopefully in February, but right now it's looking more like January, right? And we do that season recap show, we can talk about the whole season in a big picture lens and say, wow, the Patriots won 10, 11 games, whatever it ends up being, in Mac Jones's rookie season. That's terrific. If you told me back in August that they were going to win 10 or 11 games, then I would have been thrilled with that result. And that, I think, is important context that we have to hold on to.
This is ultimately where they should have been.
Right.
Close in the division, fighting for wild card spot.
Yes. It's definitely fair to be disappointed and frustrated that they had this opportunity and they squandered it, at least so far, at least to this point. But ultimately, we do have to look at the bigger picture and recognize that 10 or 11 wins with a rookie quarterback and a bunch of new faces on both sides of the football is a good progressive year, right? It's a good foundational year is the word I'm looking for. But we can have that conversation in a month. I want to get into now is discuss some of the things that actually happened in the game. And I think the other big question coming off this game, and we're going to get to the defense. I got plenty to say about the defense as well, as I'm sure you do too, Alex. But offensively, I think the biggest question is, over the last 2 games, what is wrong with Mac Jones and the Patriots passing game? Because the way I look at it, for the first 12 weeks of the season, and granted, the 2-4 start, it wasn't perfect, and it looked a lot more like this than it did during the 7-game win streak where they were great in the passing game. But for the most part, Mac Jones was 12th in EPA. He was 5th in the completion percentage over expected. He was top 5 in PFF grade at one point in time. He was trending towards being a fringe top 10 quarterback already in his rookie season throughout the first 12 weeks of the year. Week 13 happens in Buffalo. They go into the windstorm. He only throws the ball 3 times. First time since 1974 that a team has thrown the ball that few times in an NFL game. They go into the bye week. Hasn't been the same since. That's how I would lay it out from a timeline perspective, right? So the question is, how much is this what's going on with Mac? How much is this what's going on with his receivers? Obviously, it's a combination of everything. But where are we at with this passing offense? Because clearly, when they went up against a pretty good passing offense in Buffalo, they were not going to outduel Josh Allen the way that their team was playing that day.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's two different. First off, they're not there where they can play from behind yet. They're not there where they can throw when the other team knows they have to throw. And that is concerning, right? Yeah. I don't think but it's fixable. Mac Jones is going to get better. They're going to put better pieces around him. I think in terms of yesterday's game, what really hurt the passing game, I think we maybe underrated what a loss Nelson Agholor would be. And I don't mean that in the sense that he puts up numbers, but he is somebody that the defenses have to respect over the top. And part of the reason they've had success throwing to Hunter Henry up the seam, right, throwing to Kendrick Bourne and Jacoby Myers over the middle, is teams have had to leave a safety back. to accommodate Nelson Aguilar. And that wasn't the case. And you could see the difference. Hunter Henry gets taken away because teams feel like, the Bills felt like they had an extra safety they could put on him. I don't know how many times the Patriots came out in 22 or even 12 or 21 where it's N'Keal Harry and Jacoby Myers, and they're both pressed off the line on the outside, and then there's 9 or 10 guys right in the box for the Bills. Like it
is concerning when you don't have Aguilar out there, not to cut you off, but when you have Jacoby Myers, N'Keal Harry, Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith, and Jakob Johnson as your skill players, that is the slowest collection of skill players in the NFL. And I'm not sitting here trying to get into a conversation about N'Keal Harry and that draft pick and Jonnu and that's a different conversation. But just in general, that not a single person in that grouping runs faster than a 4.55, right? That's N'Keal, I think, ran a 4.53 technically, but I don't know. That was a fast stopwatch that day at the combine. So regardless of all that, that is an extremely slow group. And not having Nelson Aguilar out there, as you said, to stretch the field, they've threatened so little of the field in that game against Buffalo. There's right. Such little, talk about being able to attack every blade of grass. That's what offensive coaches always talk about. The Patriots were only able to attack maybe 25% of the grass against Buffalo on Sunday.
And the problem, they were down their 2 most explosive receivers. I'll get into that in a second, but basically go back and watch the game. The Bills are putting 10 in the box. They're rushing 6 because they know there's no threat over the top.
Right.
And it's the lack of speed. And they didn't have Nelson Aguilar. Obviously, he's out. He has a concussion. That is what it is. But they kept their most explosive playmaker off the field. Kendrick Bourne played less than 50% of the snaps. I think he is their best receiver. I think he's their most explosive player on offense. I get he didn't practice all week. I get it. And that's been a Belichick tenet in the past. But I think part of what's made this year different, and part of the reason they have had success this year, and they have, is Belichick has kind of gone away from some of his, some of what he's leaned on.
Yeah, especially with COVID.
Right?
Yeah.
Even something like playing rookies, right? We did the whole thing in the summer about how Ramondre Stevenson wouldn't play, and he's been a key player, and Barmore would probably get redshirted, and he's been a key player. But the practice thing too, Ramondre Stevenson had his best game of the season after not practicing all week. I forget what the injury was, but he didn't practice all week. He played at his best game.
Yeah,
J.C. Jackson had his best game of the season. That one was against Carolina after not practicing all week. They were clearly okay with it this year. And look, Bourne's a new player. If it's week 2, I get it. It's week 16. There's got to be 8 to 10 plays that are just generic, non-game plan specific plays that they have that he can run. Or just put him out there and have him run go routes.
Right.
But
the thing is that
he was the closest thing they had to an explosive threat, and they kept him on the bench. And
he played 47% of the snaps, right?
47. So that's a theme. We'll talk about it on the defensive side of the ball, but the coaching did not adjust in this game. They did the same thing from beginning to end. That's supposed to be a tenet of what they do. They didn't do it. And that's frustrating.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about Mac specifically because I've looked through some of the all 22. I haven't been able to sit down and watch the entire thing, but for the most part, I really felt like Mac made decent decisions with the football in this game. And it wasn't necessarily that he was missing wide open guys down the field. There's maybe one play they faked the handoff or the toss, and they had the crosser with the post from N'Keal Harry, and he ends up throwing the post into double coverage instead of throwing the cross that maybe you would have liked back. But for the most part, there wasn't a ton out there that I thought was a terrible decision-making from Mac Jones. But what I definitely saw a lot of, especially when it came to zone coverage, and we're going to talk about man coverage here in a second because that's a whole nother issue. When it came to zone coverage, a lot of receivers converting routes in ways that Mac Jones was not anticipating. I posted one clip on Twitter. The Patriots were running a sail concept. They have the vertical clearing out the sideline and Hunter Henry filling in with the intermediate route, whether it's an out or a corner. I couldn't tell you, right? It depends on the call, I suppose, or only they could tell me that. But Mac throws the corner and Hunter Henry runs an out. Right. So it looks like the ball is a bad throw, right? It looks like it's overthrown and Hunter Henry tries to adjust to it and can't. That was probably one of the only downfield opportunities the Patriots put on tape the entire game where I said, oh, they really had a chance to hit a shot here. Right. And they dialed it up. They got the zone coverage look they were expecting. It was cover 2. Mac saw it, got it to the right guy. but they weren't on the same page. Hunter Henry flattened his route off on the out route. Mac threw the corner, and the ball falls incomplete because the two guys aren't on the same page. That is frustrating at this point in time in the season to see how disjointed the passing attack was in general. And I know a lot of people want to make it about Mac's accuracy, but Mac's accuracy would change a lot. The narrative on that would change a lot if some of these route conversions are going the right way, right? He's throwing it to the outside. He's throwing it to the sideline, and Hunter Henry's stopping his route and sitting his route down instead of running out towards the sideline. Hunter Henry thinks he's running an out. Mac thinks he's running a corner. These are the types of conversions that you see over and over again that are frustrating for Jones. So, look, I don't really understand. I got to be honest with you. And I know some people think I'm a Mac hater. Some people think I defend Mac. So I don't know where people are at with my opinion on Mac. But I got to be honest with you. I did not watch this game back in any capacity and have concerns about the quarterback and said, oh, the biggest problem out there on Sunday was the QB, right? That was not how I felt watching it live. That's not how I feel now about watching the game from what I have seen of it back on the coach's tape. This really felt like a game where his receivers were not doing their jobs properly, whether it was separating against man coverage or it was route conversions against zone coverage and being in the right places. Mac was visibly frustrated all day long that he was throwing the ball to one spot and guys were going to another spot. You could just tell that it was really killing him all game long. So where is your opinion on that, though? Because I think a lot of people are being pretty harsh right now on Mac Jones on Monday morning quarterback.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm pretty pro Mac. Roll Tide and all. I thought it was his worst game of the year, but I also wouldn't put him in my top 5 reasons they lost.
Yeah.
Right. I think I find it hard to believe that every route that broke the wrong way was on the receiver and not him. And we don't have the play sheet in front of us, but right. I feel like that's got to be a 50-50 street. I thought he put the team on his back when he had opportunities, and you love to see that. The quarterback sneak. He absorbs that hit from Matt Milano late in the game, gets right up, kind of try to light that spark.
Yeah.
But he just, I thought at least against the Colts when he struggled early, he fought back and he actually made plays as they were trying to come back. I don't know that he made plays late in that game. Like, he had opportunities. It's hard because the whole offense just wasn't there. Yeah. I didn't think outside of Damian Harris. I mean, just
Damian Harris and the run blocking were solid. Other than that, the whole offense was a mess.
It just sort of compounded. So, I mean, here's the thing: if this game is in 3 years, I think that this is a major red flag for Mac Jones, even if it's next year, because at a certain point, you want your first round quarterback to elevate the team. And I know I've talked about Mac Jones being net neutral. I still think you need a little bit of that. And that would have been the perfect spot to do it. As a rookie, rookie evaluation is different. Again, it goes back to, is this a learning experience for him? Because this is the thing, early in the season, we're talking about Mac getting better, and he was progressively getting better. Is he still getting better the last couple of weeks? I thought he was from the Colts. I thought maybe he did at the Colts game. He didn't get better from the Colts game to the Bills game.
So it is important to mention, I would say, with that conversation, that development's not always linear, right? You're not always
right.
Development's not always going to be in an upward trajectory all the time. There's going to be step backs. There's going to be setbacks. There's going to be issues. There's going to be good games. There's going to be bad games. But I think what we've seen from Mac, and I would say the one thing that maybe you could be a little bit concerned about now, even still, the fourth down play, for instance, he does play make a little bit, right? He got outside the pocket, right. He directed traffic, and moved Jacoby Myers, and he play makes in his own way. He's not Josh Allen. He's not going to scramble to his right, go off platform and zing it 25 yards down the field. That's not going to be who he's going to be ever. But I think what you look at is that this passing game with Mac Jones at quarterback, and given in his current state, he could develop into a different type of player down the road. But in his current state, they need to execute at a very, very, very high level to produce against a good defense like Buffalo has, right? They need to be on their P's and Q's on the same page on every single route. They need to really let the system do the driving, right? That's how they need to be. And that comes down to X's and O's. At this point in time, Mac is not an elite playmaker, right? He is not somebody that's going out there and making all these ridiculous plays like Josh Allen did on Sunday. Could he be that down the road from the pocket? Absolutely. Right now, he's not there yet as a rookie, and that's totally fine. But I think the other concern that I had from watching this game, and Bill Belichick came out and said it this morning when we spoke to a very grumpy Bill Belichick, as you could expect on Monday morning. He said, we didn't get open against man coverage, right? That wasn't, I'm paraphrasing, but that was essentially what he said, was that the Buffalo played a little bit more man coverage and they didn't get open. And I look at some of these guys and I look at some of the way they ran their routes on Sunday too. And I'm perplexed by some of the decisions in terms of releases and stuff like that. But they did not separate at all against man. I put up the stats. Mac was 2 for 10 for 27 yards and a pick against man coverage yesterday. Not good enough against man. This is a problem that got a lot better, I would say, this year, right? Last year, Patriots were 31st in the league in passer rating in man coverage, right? Against man coverage with Cam and that group last year. This year, they're better. They're middle of the pack in that statistic. So they are getting better in terms of getting open against man and having a quarterback that can win against man coverage. But this was a back down to earth type of game in that respect too. And I look at Jacoby Myers got open a little bit. He was probably the most consistent guy that they had that could separate. But with no Aguilar, with Bourne limited, the tight ends did absolutely nothing against man. The backs did absolutely nothing against man. It was tough sledding every single time Buffalo called man coverage.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too, I think and this goes to coaching, did you feel like there were too many plays that they called that took too long to develop? I just don't think.
Well, that's the other thing. So I'm glad you brought that up because.
So just real quick, like from my point of view, before you get, because I have my point of view and then you have the right answer.
Yeah.
I think that I don't think Josh McDaniels had a feel for what the Patriots offensive line was doing in that game, or what the Bills pass rush was doing in that game, because he's calling plays that needed time to develop and that time just wasn't there. And that's not on Mac. That's not on the receivers. I think that's the thing where, and again, this is a theme of the whole game. I think the Patriots coaches never picked up on the flow, on the tempo, on the mood, whatever you want to call it. They never picked up on what was happening on the field. This is what I criticized the Bills for immensely after week 13. And I'll bring it back and say the Patriots did it. The Patriots did what they wanted to do. They put their head down. They put the blinders on. They closed their eyes. La, 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 la. They did what they wanted to do. They didn't allow the game to dictate any of their decisions. And that's bad coaching. That's bad coaching. And this is another example.
Yeah, so your point about Mac not getting rid of the football, I think one of the most interesting statistics that I've uncovered.
Mac not getting rid of the football. I'm saying they were calling plays where he had to hold the ball too long.
Okay, yeah. Either way, right? Maybe a little bit of yes. I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
So just in general, whether it was scheme related, play calling related, or Mac related or receiver related, Mac Jones over the last 2 weeks, his average time to throw, Alex, has been 3.1 seconds. In the first 13 games of the season, it was 2.5 seconds, right? So he's holding the ball. And I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but in an NFL game, an extra half a second's a lot, right? That's a big difference and that's a lot of difference in terms of timing, rhythm, continuity, all those types of things in the passing game. So not only is he not throwing the ball as accurately down the field, but the ball's not coming out as quickly. And it's not coming out on time as often as it did before. Whether that's play calling, whether that's defenses taking away first reads and making Mac Jones hold the football in the pocket and scan through, whatever the case may be, we know this, right? Whether it was Brady, whether it was Cam, whether it was Jimmy G, whether it was Matt Castle, the Patriots offense is designed to get the football out. They don't want the quarterback sitting there in the pocket for 3 seconds per drop back. That's not the type of offense they want to be. They want to be a timing, rhythm-based, quick passing game. They want the ball out. And Mac Jones holding the football, whether, again, it's a multitude of factors that are contributing to that, but the fact that number over the last 2 weeks is 3.1 seconds is way, way, way too high for this scheme to be running properly. So something is going on, whether it's scheme, whether it's Mac, whether it's receivers not getting open, something is going wrong that is causing them to hold the football. And that's not what they want to be doing. So that's definitely another thing that I look at with this passing game. They absolutely need to get back to getting the football out, right? Getting the football out and getting it to the guys it needs to get to. Mac talks about that a lot. He says, I need to get the ball out and I need to get it to the people that should have the football because I'm not athletic. I'm not fast. I'm not the guy that should be having the football. The other guy should have the football. So that's what they have to get back to as well. Before we move over to the defense.
So just real quick on that, though.
Yeah.
I think it goes back to the point, at least in this game, like that stuff all has to be in the middle of the field.
Yeah.
You can't, and I know like you can, but you're not really
quick games up to the boundary. You know, they've done that before.
Yeah, but that's
plant flat, you know, kind of like hook flat, whatever you want to call it, right?
But is that really the most productive way of doing that? Is throwing quick outside the numbers on a regular basis? Like, I feel like that's
I know it didn't go for. I know it didn't go for a first down, but I thought the play that looked the most like the Patriots offense was that third down throw to Jacoby Myers. That set up the fourth down play, right? They go for it on fourth down afterwards. And Hunter Henry.
You want some Patriots breaking news here?
Oh, what's going on?
Matthew Judon tests positive for COVID.
And Juwan Bentley. So we were supposed to talk.
So that would be what was going on.
We were supposed to talk to Juwan Bentley today. We did not. So he tested positive for COVID. Matthew Judon, over the last 2 games, Alex, has had 2 quarterback pressures in the last 2 games combined. So I thought there was something physically going on with Matthew Judon in terms of a football injury. As it turns out, maybe Matthew Judon has had COVID this entire time, right?
He's not going to have it for 2 weeks and then just test positive today. I don't think that.
I don't know. Something was up with him, right? His energy level, his effectiveness, everything. In yesterday's game, it just wasn't. He was not playing with the same fire that we normally see from Matthew Judon. I'm also telling you right now, personal note, Indianapolis was cursed. All right. There was something going on there in Indianapolis in the press box. A bunch of people that were sitting in that press box have gotten COVID. Obviously, the players are catching COVID left and right. So bad news for the Patriots. Judon, Bentley. It is Monday. So if Judon and Bentley are vaccinated, they could still play like Kendrick Bourne, right? They could still clear. It's also the Jaguars who have a huge COVID problem on their hands as well. So,
well, I mean, the 106 players today.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's got to be a Christmas thing, right?
Look, I don't want to get into the should the league be testing or not conversation.
Let's circle back to that after. I think we need to talk about some of the X's and O's of this game yesterday, but it is important, right? And I know people don't really want us to talk about the COVID stuff. I know it's not fun to hear about, but let's circle back to it at the end.
Any of this fun to hear about today? I think that's the point. This is a Festivus airing of grievances is what this show is today.
Yeah. Okay. Last thing on the offense before we move over to the defense. Damian Harris was the only player that showed up from the skill group yesterday, right? I mean, at least they can hang their hat on the running game being successful. The running game was not just successful. They were awesome in that game. 50% success rate. Damian Harris, over 5 yards per carry. They were just as good as they were a couple weeks ago. They just didn't get to run the ball quite as much as they did in week 13. Harris ran hard. He ran angry. He was fantastic. The blocking was pretty darn good in that game as well. From the run blocking perspective, the only good thing that I would say they did in that game, Alex, was run the football in all 3 phases, honestly, right? I mean, the only good thing that they did on offense or defense was being able to run the football.
So since we're kind of doing, people are doing the, can we already talk about next season? The season's over thing. I'll give you my, I mean, I have a couple takes on that, but Damian Harris needs to be a captain next year.
Yeah.
I mean, he was the one guy when they came out flat, putting his shoulder down, bowling through players, keeping the energy up. He has been one of their best draft picks over the last couple of years. He's got just the mentality. I mean, he's a really good football player. I don't want to take away from that, but you talk about the mentality, like the brain you want in a football player. The dude he gets it. He gets it. He understands what's going on, what the deal is. He knows, like he needs, this isn't like, I don't mean this as criticizing him, like he's not talking enough, but like, I think the more he emerges as a leader, and it sounds like that sort of happened this year, it's begun to happen, but the more he emerges as a leader and a voice on this team, the better. Yeah. that's a guy, I'd trust having my back 100 times out of 100. Yeah. I think they nailed it as a player, as a person, as a leader. They nailed it when they picked Damian Harris. I think he, all love in the world to him. He went out there regardless of everything that was going on, and he played his game. So shout out to him.
Yep, well said. All right, let's move over to the defense side of the ball because plenty of grievances to air on that side of things. I want to say this though because I think it's important, and I understand that Miles Bryant's getting thrown under the bus a lot today and taking his lumps for what was a bad performance yesterday against Isaiah McKenzie. But when I look at what happened with the defense, especially after watching it again, Alex, this was a coaching failure by the defense. This was, I don't care how often you want to say, oh, the Patriots missed Jonathan Jones and Miles Bryant can't cover in man. And I am telling you right now, this was a coaching failure by the Patriots to stick in cover one, man free, and all Isaiah McKenzie did was run routes to out leverage Miles Bryant, right? Whether it was the crossing routes or it was the routes out of bunch formations, they did not. The Patriots pride themselves defensively. One of the most important tenets of Bill Belichick's defensive system is leverage, right? Is maintaining leverage, is having body positioning on the route. And they did not have that at any point in time against anybody on the Buffalo offense this entire game. And that's why they got destroyed the way that they did. Stephon Diggs beats J.C. Jackson to the inside. The post safety is nowhere to be found. Miles Bryant, if you look at, I posted Isaiah McKenzie's route chart from Next Gen, Alex. It's all crossing routes. He ran over routes the entire game. And they never closed the middle of the field. They never jammed him. They never redirected him. They just allowed a guy that runs a sub 4.4, is a return specialist, run in a straight line across the field the entire game and get into foot races with Miles Bryant. So Miles Bryant's sitting there, right? And he's outside leverage. He's on Isaiah McKenzie's outside hip. And he has to run all the way across the field with the guy. And there's nobody from the middle of the field closing it off, right? There's no safety coming down. There's no linebacker laying them out. There's no resistance whatsoever from the Patriots in the middle of the field. And Bryant is left out to dry. It was a frustrating tape to watch because I truly felt like the Patriots, for some reason, they sat in cover one and they did not want to get out of it. I don't know what it was that they felt like they had to stay in cover one the entire game, but they never got out of it. And he beat Miles Bryant to the inside every single time. And it really wasn't Miles Bryant's fault. I don't care. You put Jonathan Jones out there. I still think that similar results happen if they play the middle of the field the same way that they played it yesterday.
So I think they have a better shot. They
obviously have a better shot, right? Jonathan Jones is a better player. But the way that they got out leverage and the way that they never helped him to the middle of the field, I just don't know how they can expect Miles Bryant to cover that route. In that position, right? We talk all the time about Bill Belichick and the coaches putting these players in their best position to succeed, and Miles Bryant was not put in a position to succeed yesterday, point blank.
And look, and here's the more concerning thing to me. They tried it. Like, all right, you tried it. Not everything you drop during the week is going to work 100%. You're going to have to change things. That's football. That's what this team is so good at. I didn't need 60 minutes to figure out that strategy wasn't going to work.
Right.
I know you didn't need 60 minutes. I think most people at home didn't need 60 minutes to figure that out. Coaching staff took them at least 60 minutes. They still might be trying to figure it out.
Right.
At a certain point, look, Miles Bryant, I think it's just a matter of Miles Bryant's not physically fast enough to cover Isaiah McKenzie. McKenzie's one of the fastest players in the league.
I don't think anybody is.
Well, so at a certain point, you need to recognize that and make a change. Whether it's giving D'Angelo Ross a shot. And would that have worked? Would Ross have been able to cover him? I don't know. But you don't know until you try. And it was kind of one of those things. Honestly, Devin McCourty is probably the fastest player on the defense. He's played some corner. I would have given Devin McCourty a look there. Just a look, just see what happens.
They were so worried about...
And then the other problem is, you'd like to think Shaun Wade could get a look there. He's inactive.
Right.
Juwan Williams. I don't know if this is a matchup for Juwan Williams, but maybe you come out with Williams, who's significantly bigger, and you just jam him at the line. He upset the timing. He's inactive.
Yeah.
They weren't ready on all of. I think they expected the Bills with all their COVID cases at wide receiver to come out and just run. And I don't know how you can expect that from that team.
Yeah.
They weren't ready. They weren't ready for it. And they were caught totally off guard once it started happening. No adjustments whatsoever. Again, I think Miles Bryant's a good player. I think there's a role for him on this team, and he can do a lot of things that they need. But at a certain point, he didn't play well, but at a certain point, it's on the coaching staff. Yeah. At a certain point, the dude's getting beat time and time again. You can't just leave him out there to dry like that. It's not like, he was covering them all game and then McKenzie started popping off in the fourth quarter. Right. If that happens, that happens. You tip your cap. We knew it from the jump. That matchup wasn't in their favor. They never adjusted. They sat on their hands.
Yeah. So I think that the reason why they never adjusted, the only reason that I can come up with is what they were doing was they were dropping those linebackers, Bentley, Hightower, Van Noy. They were dropping them off into those low zones or low holes, right? Where they were trying to keep them in passing lanes. Jamie Collins, too, add him to the list. They were trying to keep them in passing lanes, but they were also trying to keep them to spy Josh Allen. They were so petrified of Josh Allen's running ability. They were petrified of it. They did not want Josh Allen to run around. They rushed 3 or 4, contained rush, right? They didn't really try to pressure him all that much. And then they also had spies on him. None of it worked because Josh Allen just had so much space and time to move around. And you look at all these things, and the adjustment to me to help Miles Bryant out might not even have been to move somebody else on to Isaiah McKenzie, but it would have probably been to play 2-man, right? To play 2 high safeties and then using one of those safeties to cut off the crossing route from left to right, right? If he's running left to right, you have the far hash safety, cut him off as he's coming over the middle of the field. The problem was the Patriots didn't want to take the extra player out of the box because they were so worried about Josh Allen running on them. And at some point in time, you have to look at it and say, okay, even if Josh Allen runs on us, Isaiah McKenzie averaged 11.4 yards per catch. Is Josh Allen going to average 11.4 yards per rush if you just allow him to scramble, right? I mean, maybe he'll get a big one here or there, but you got to hope that you're able to collapse and take him down, right? You got to hope that you're able to limit him somehow. So there was no adjustments. They played cover 1. They got shredded in cover 1. They allowed Isaiah McKenzie to win foot races coming across the field with nobody helping him out, Miles Bryant, that is. And the other thing that was really frustrating is the Bills kept on running routes out of that bunch formation, right? They had the 3-man bunch, and they were manning it up. The Patriots are playing lock and level rules. So they were in man-to-man matchups, and all they were doing was they were taking Isaiah McKenzie as the inside receiver, and they were just running him out in the flat. Right. And Miles Bryant starting from an inside position. He's out leveraged. He can't get there. And if you're not switching it off, then it's just easy. It's easy yards underneath the defense. So many frustrating things. They played zone early, and Josh Allen was taking those checkdowns, right? He was checking it down to Singletary. He was taking 8, 9, 10 yards at a time on those checkdowns. So they finally got out of that. And they tried to play man-to-man coverage, and their leverage rules just got exposed. Dable knew the answers, and he absolutely exposed all the leverage rules. And really, I look at this game from a defensive perspective. I know a lot of people have also been out there and said they had no pass rush. They got no pressure on Josh Allen. There was no rush whatsoever. He had all day to throw, those types of things. This game to me, Alex, is way more of a coverage breakdown game than a pass rush breakdown game. Their gap integrity wasn't great. They allowed Allen to extend plays. They allowed him to move around, but they actually pressured him on 40% of his dropbacks. They hurried him 20 times in this game. But the problem was that every single time they got some pressure on him, every single time somebody broke through and was able to get in his face, he had open receivers everywhere. So there was always an outlet. There was always a way out of the pressure. So generating sacks, it's a marriage, right? You have to be able to marry rush and coverage. If you don't have good coverage, you're not going to be able to sack the quarterback. And if you don't have good rush, you're not going to be able to cover for 6 seconds. There has to be a marriage between the two. And yesterday, I thought the pass rush, for the most part, did pressure a little bit, but they weren't able to get him on the ground because there was places to go. right? There was outlets, there was receivers open behind it. So really a defensive game plan that didn't work, that had no answers and was absolutely torched from start to finish. You give up 7 red zone drives and you don't force a team to punt. That's as bad as it gets.
So here's the thing. I think ultimately the Patriots defense did what they wanted to do, not what they needed to do. I think they did what they wanted to do. And we talked about this all week. The game plan is sit back and cover 2, cover 4.
Right.
Make Josh Allen take the checkdowns all day. Don't get beat deep and make him beat you in the red zone. Objectively, it's not a bad strategy.
Right.
Because the Bills are one of the worst red zone offenses in the league, and the Patriots going into that game had the best red zone defense. What happened was 2 things happened. First off, Josh Allen, and I see Bills fans saying it's the greatest game Josh Allen played in his career. It's not. You beat the Patriots. I get you're excited. Calm down.
It might have been the smartest game he's played all year.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
It is the smartest game because he never took the bait. Even the one mistake, and I'll get to that. That wasn't him getting anxious, getting impatient. Him and the receiver are on different pages. So, and at a certain point, you tip your hat to him, right? And Devin McCourty said it after the game. You can't cover everything. You just kind of figure out what you're going to take away and how you want to make them beat you, and you hope you execute. And to an extent, they did that. You got to be better tackling after the catch. I mean, there were some brutal missed tackles in that game.
They had 12 missed tackles in the game.
Yeah. So they didn't execute it perfectly. So that's the first part of it is I think at a certain point, you just got to tip your cap to Josh Allen. Those guys get paid too.
Right.
The Patriots laid the bait out and he didn't take it. He never took it. And that's rare for him in his career. The second part of it is if you're going to play that way, where you're going to say, we don't care what they do between the 20s because we think we can force a mistake or we can stop them in the red zone. If you want to play that way, again, that's fine. They've won Super Bowls playing that way. But that's contingent on when they make the mistake, you have to capitalize.
Right.
There's no room for error. And there were 2 mistakes that they failed to capitalize on that cost them the game. One of them being obviously the J.C. Jackson drop interception.
Yeah.
I mean, he houses that. This is probably the best show of the year. I'm the happiest boy in America. The other one, and this was a little more subtle, but if the game goes another way, I think this play is a major point of contention today. It was their second to, I can't remember exactly the drive. It was their second to last drive. The Patriots had started calling timeouts. 1st and 10, the Bills ran the ball, no gain, timeout. 2nd and 10, and they were like in field goal range, all of it. They threw a pass, and it was incomplete. Allen threw a pass in the flat. It was incomplete. Yeah. Do you remember what play I'm talking about?
Yep.
They essentially gifted the Patriots an extra timeout.
Right.
And that's one where, all right, if you get off the field there, they just gifted you 40 seconds to go down the field and score and take the lead because the Pats were down 4 at the time. Here you go. And instead, the Bills ended up, I believe that ultimately what happened on that sequence, if I remember correctly, it was the same drive, was the Josh Allen 4th down bootleg.
Yeah.
So that was 2 opportunities where, they had a chance. The Bills made the mistake. They had a chance to capitalize and they didn't. If you're going to play defense that way, and I'm all for that as a defensive strategy, because again, points over yards all day. I'm all for that as a defensive strategy. But if you're going to play that way, you have to capitalize. You have to capitalize when the other team screws up, and they didn't do it.
Yeah. I think every single time we sit here, Alex, and the Patriots defense look like crap and loses a football game where they play terribly on defense, it's always on crossers, in breakers, stuff to the middle of the field where they're attacking those leverage rules and help defenders, right? The Patriots in this game, they had the low hole guys, right, to try to contain Josh Allen, but also stick in some of those low passing lanes. And Allen was just zipping the ball to the intermediate level, right, by the low hole defenders and in front of the post safety. How many games have we talked about? Oh, it was the quick slants that killed him this game. It was the crossers that killed him that. It's never the outside the numbers stuff, right? It's never the deep ball. It's never the throw to the X receiver on the boundary. It's never that. It's always crossers, slants, in breakers, things over the middle of the field, intermediate routes, attacking those leverage rules. And for some reason, they get into these game plans and they get into these sequences and they can't get out of them, right? They can't adjust out of them. And I thought this defense would be different because I thought this defense would have the ability to play different styles of coverage. They might not be as dominant in man-to-man or in cover one as like the 18 team or the 19 team, right? But they have a lot more options in zone coverage that they could potentially throw at you. But they were just so slow at collapsing in zone on the short stuff when Allen was checking the ball down that they had to get out of it. And that was a wake-up call, I think, about this Patriots secondary and this Patriots defense a little bit. I don't think that look, Allen played a fantastic game. There's not a lot of quarterbacks that are going to be able to fully replicate that game plan. But every single time this happens, remember last year against Houston with Deshaun Watson? It was the same thing, right? It was crossing routes. It was in breakers over the middle. It's the same song and dance every single time the Patriots get beat. We go all the way back to the Eagles Super Bowl in 2017, and it was the same exact thing. So at some point in time, they have to figure out a way, whether it's more too high coverage, whether it's more zone coverage, whether it's whatever it is. Bill Belichick certainly knows more about it than I do. Whatever it is, they need to find a plan B. When they get into these game plans and cover one's not working, and that was the plan going in, they need to be able to find something else that they can go to that will throw off that, because obviously the Bills prepared for cover one, right? They obviously had all their man beaters drawn up in the play sheet. So you have to prepare, and you have to have something else that you can pivot to when that strategy isn't working. And my guess is they just didn't feel comfortable pivoting because they didn't have something that they felt comfortable calling. And I think that's the problem.
Again, that goes back to the point. Juwan Williams and Shaun Wade shouldn't have both been inactive.
Right.
I get maybe they don't trust those guys. I don't know why they don't trust Shaun Wade. I get he got here late, but they did this last year too at times where they just shortchanged themselves in terms of personnel. They handcuffed themselves in terms of personnel heading into games. And Christian Wilkerson really didn't play yesterday, right?
Yeah.
They could have given that spot to another defensive back. I'm trying to go off the top of my head. Off of guys who didn't really
except
play.
When they drew up the flea flicker, that I don't know what's going on with them executing flea flickers. It's awful.
I'll tell you what it is. The flea flicker needs to be a halfback dive. The flea flicker, very simply, is a halfback dive. Stop calling toss flea flickers.
Yeah.
Stop calling shotgun flea flickers. That's not like I get they're trying to be different.
Right.
That's not how that play works. That's just the flea flicker needs to happen quick, and they're just not giving themselves enough time to do it.
Yeah, it was so the flea flicker, the deep option on the flea flicker, the deep over was Christian Wilkerson. I saw 17 out there, and I was like, really? That's the guy you're gonna have be the number one option on this play? I was shocked by that, but. Your overall point with the secondary and having no other options out there because Williams and Wade were inactive is a good one. And I guess they just didn't feel why activate D'Angelo Ross if you're not even going to give him a chance when Miles Bryant's getting beat like that. So it was all in all, the inactive sheet was questionable. The game plan was questionable. There was no pivot defensively. So I understand it's easy to back to my original point. I understand that it's easy to scapegoat Miles Bryant. It's easy to pick on J.C. Jackson for not having a great game against Diggs and missing that tackle and the interception. It's easy to talk about how slow the Patriots linebackers were, how they couldn't collapse on the short routes and they couldn't get the checkdowns down and they couldn't tackle. It's easy to say all that kind of stuff. Did the coaches put the players in a position to succeed on the field? And in my mind, too often in this game, the players were left out to dry. And there was no rhyme or reason whatsoever to stick in the coverage that they were playing when Brian Daboll clearly had it all figured out, right? He clearly knew what was going to beat cover one. And he had the Isaiah McKenzie, and he was running them across the field. And the other thing I'll say quickly here before we wrap this up, Isaiah, the one benefit that the Bills had to Beasley and Davis being out in this game, Gabe Davis, Isaiah McKenzie's been around. He's not a new player to their system, right? They don't necessarily use him as much at receiver when those guys are healthy, but he's somebody that has been around the block and has been around that team for a while now. So it wasn't like they were putting in Christian Wilkerson, right?
Right. They knew, he also just might be better than Cole Beasley.
At this point, he's definitely a harder guy to match up against, right? Because he's of that speed, if he can run those overs. All right. It reminded me a little bit, honestly, quickly of when the Bills also had John Brown, right? Because you had Diggs and John Brown, so you had two guys out there that were really good on the crossers. It was a problem. The Patriots couldn't cover it. All right. I want to end it. I want to circle back to the COVID stuff here for a second, because I think it is important. I know where you were going with it, right? In terms of pausing the season, I think is where you were going with it.
No. Get it done with. No.
Where were you going with then?
I hate dipping into this. I hate tipping into this, but if guys are vaccinated and they're not symptomatic, and the testing from the league, the research from the league says that asymptomatic vaccinated people can't spread the virus, what are we doing? You're looking for a boogeyman. Like, I hate to use that word because the connotation of England. You're just looking for a boogeyman at that point.
Right.
Test unvaccinated players. Test guys who are symptomatic. You certainly don't want people getting sick. Like, this isn't to diminish what COVID is.
Right.
But, like, I don't know. It's getting out of control.
Yeah. How many players did you say today?
106. 106. And this isn't, you know, I'm probably pissing off both sides of the political aisle here, and I really try not to get political. And it sucks that a freaking pandemic is political, as stupid as that is, both sides. If the science tells us that asymptomatic vaccinated people are fine, then I'll buy it. The scientists are smarter than I am. Asymptomatic people are fine, then we don't need to be testing them. Then let them go about their business. You don't need a hunt. Like you don't need a hunt for the virus, right? Take care of people who are sick. If people aren't sick, they're not sick. Maybe I'm an idiot. I'm a sports writer. I don't know what the hell's going on in a global pandemic, but I do my reading, and not these obscure, pretty basic down the middle places. It seems unnecessary at this point. And the CDC shortened the guidance this year and all of that. I don't know. It's frustrating because it sucks, because this has been a really good year in the NFL, I think. The parity is as high as it's ever been, and we got a real sprint to the finish right now in the AFC and kind of in the NFC too. And if it's derailed because you have replacement teams out there for the last 2 weeks of the season, that's just going to be really disappointing as fans. It's going to be a bummer.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think we're at the point in time now where it's probably smarter, especially with these highly trained, highly conditioned athletes, to start treating symptoms more than treating positives, right? Where we're more concerned about, is he actually sick? And I'm not saying to throw a player out there. What I'm saying is that if a player feels that he's less than 100% and he's feeling some of the effects of COVID-19, then he doesn't play. If he feels perfectly fine and he feels fit to play, then he should be allowed. If he's vaccinated, then he should be allowed to play. And the CDC came out today and said that now they feel like a 5-day quarantine is sufficient for COVID. So some of these guys that test positive on Monday, talking about playing on Sunday, that's CDC guidelines are saying those guys should be able to play.
That's what I'm saying. Let's just catch up again. So I don't know scientifically how all this works. I will admit that. I'm smart enough to admit I'm not smart enough. But if the CDC is dropping, if we're using protocol, if there's one thing we all know about the pandemic and this virus, it's that it's basically different every week, every 2 weeks. You have to keep updating. We shouldn't be using protocols in December that were put together in August.
Yeah.
That just doesn't,
they have evolved them, but as you said, it evolves constantly on the fly. All right. That's enough about COVID. It depresses me. And I think we are at a point, though, where we know enough about the virus that you should be able to manage it somewhat in terms of, is this guy asymptomatic? Is this guy not? Is this guy fit to play? Is he not? They should be able to determine that pretty easily. And before we wrap this up, though, Alex, I really want to thank a big, strong contingent of Buffalo Bills fans watching the show in the chat today. Yes. I know they came in here just to talk some smack, but our sponsors are loving the numbers that we're getting right now because of you guys. So We really appreciate it. I know that you thought that you were going to get on our nerves, but I'm actually happy that you're in here. So thank you very much for coming in here and watching the show today and enjoying our misery. I don't think there's any fan base in the NFL that searches other teams' podcasts just to watch their shows after a week, right? Like, you understand where I'm coming? Like, how do you even find us? I'm so confused.
They come out of nowhere. It's unlike any other fan base. And look, I took my victory lap 3 weeks ago. I got my victory lap taken on me. The only insult they have for me is ugly. And I'm not saying that they're necessarily wrong, but like, normally like other fan bases, they'll mix in calling me dumb. They'll mix in calling me a homer, things like that. Even short, the Bills fans just go with ugly. That's it. That's the only insult they have for me. And I gotta again, they're not wrong, but coming from the city of Buffalo hurts a little deeper.
Thanks, Buffalo. Thanks for tuning in today. Hopefully we'll see you on Friday when we preview, or Thursday when we preview Patriots Jaguars. I know you're going to be really interested in that matchup, so you should come right back, right?
Can I give a quick thought on that game to kind of tease it forward?
Really quick, you can, yes.
When the Patriots won 7 in a row, they started out by beating the bag out of the Jets, 54-13.
Yes.
And we talked at the time, the Patriots kind of needed to see one go in, right? To use a basketball analogy. Yeah. They need to beat anything less than a 3-score win over the Jaguars is unacceptable. I think if they could beat the bag out of the Jaguars, then maybe you start looking at, hey, they just needed the confidence booster and it's back. Maybe. That's my initial thought on that.
It's a tune-up game, right? It's a college-style tune-up game. It's like when Ohio State schedules Bemidji State in the first game of the season and beats them 90-0, right? That's the type of game we're looking at on Sunday, assuming I hate to say this, but assuming that everybody stays healthy, knock on wood, with COVID, and there's no crazy Matthew Judon, he goes on COVID, Bentley goes on COVID. That's the great equalizer right now. It feels like across the league, right? These gimme matchups can turn into real games real fast if Brian Hoyer has to make the start. So hopefully we don't get to that point. Hopefully we can get this under control, and hopefully Matthew Judon and Juwan Bentley make a speedy recovery and are asymptomatic. But until we doing Thursday or Friday, Alex?
I don't know.
Friday is New Year's Eve, so maybe we'll do Thursday.
Probably Thursday.
Yeah. Thursday preview show, Patriots Jaguars. I think that there's a plenty to talk about. We were going to do some Q&A because we thought this was going to be an easy game, but now that the Patriots coming off this game, I think that there's plenty of stuff that we need to discuss, but we'll take some questions hopefully by the end of that show as well if you want to come back and answer those questions. And by all means, Bills Mafia, join us on Thursday for Pats Jaguars, and we'll talk about some more things, and you can brag some more in the chat. But until then, signing off for Alex Barth, I'm Evan Lazar. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you Thursday.